Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into the story behind Changemappers. And what's really interesting is that this whole journey, it didn't start with a line of code or some fancy business plan. Nope, it started with a single, really hard-earned truth.
This question, right here, this is the spark. This is the origin point for literally everything we're about to talk about. And it's a question that wasn't born from some big success, but from the sharp, painful sting of failure.
So we're going to follow this incredible 9-year journey to answer that one question. We'll trace the path from a moment of, well, profound difficulty all the way to the edge of a massive breakthrough. It's a story about moving from isolation to real connection.
All right, let's get into it. Our story kicks off back in 2017, in a place the founder calls the Desert of Failure.
So the whole thing was kicked off by the failure of a previous venture, a startup called Speech Angel. But here's the thing about failure. Sometimes it gives you the most powerful insights. And the insight here was huge. People trying to do good in the world are almost doomed to fail because they're doing it alone. And that one difficult truth, that became the seed for everything that would become changemakers.
Okay, so armed with this really powerful new understanding, what do you think they did next? Their first instinct wasn't to just jump in and start building something new. No, it was to stop and just listen.
And what's really fascinating here is the two-pronged approach they took. Think of it like a tree. Internally, they worked on the roots, having these deep, thoughtful discussions about what systemic change even means. At the same time, externally, they were exploring the canopy, doing tons of deep listening interviews with all sorts of people. The big takeaway from all this was a total game changer. What these changemakers needed wasn't another productivity app. What they desperately needed was a way to find each other, to fight that crushing isolation that always leads to burnout.
So, just as they were laying this foundation of listening, while the world was about to get turned upside down, this next chapter was all about crisis, and it forced Changemappers to adapt and completely transform on the fly. First came the storm. In 2020, the COVID crisis hit, and it tested everything. It spurred them to create Yo-Samsushag, which means good neighborliness, a super rapid community response to help neighbors who are suddenly cut off from support. And then, after the storm, came the river. This was a multi-year partnership with a major university, Edvis Laram. It created this steady flow, bridging abstract social ideas with real academic rigor and, importantly, digital tools.
But here's the thing. Transformation isn't always a calm, steady river. Sometimes it's a fire. They saw this firsthand inside a purpose discovery group they were part of, and this experience taught them a really critical lesson about how organizations actually change.
And this is the crucial point. They learned that shifting away from old-school top-down structures isn't some peaceful, Zen-like meditation. Oh no, it's often a fire, a messy, friction-filled combustion of old ideas. And you need that heat to burn away the old stuff and clear the ground for something new and genuinely self-organized. All this intense focus on process and structure led them to an even deeper place. It led to a realization about the importance of the inner state of the person doing the work. And this is what they call the inner mountain climb. This quote, from a framework known as Theory U, basically became their North Star. In 2023, things really crystallized. They shifted their focus away from just the external what and how, and turned inward, to the who, to the changemakers themselves. And wouldn't you know it, the very next year, that inner mountain climb revealed a really dangerous pitfall. They watched a spiritual community completely collapse. And it showed them the immense danger of having these beautiful, high ideals that aren't grounded in solid psychological structures. There's a name for this. It's called spiritual bypassing.
And what they learned from that collapse is just absolutely essential. This slide lays it all out. For any community to actually work, you need these 4 pillars. High ideals aren't enough. You need clear, explicit agreements. You need firm boundaries. You need to acknowledge that people might need actual professional trauma support, and you have to nurture strong individuals because you can't have a strong group without them.
So after all those years of external action in storms and rivers and that intense inner mountain climb, all the different threads of this long journey finally started to come together. They reached the summit, and suddenly the view forward became crystal clear. This is where it all started to click into place. They began mixing together all these powerful frameworks you see here. Everything from inner development goals for personal resilience to network analysis for understanding how people collaborate across the globe. It was about pulling in all these different streams of wisdom, even using AI for what they call collaborative hybrid intelligence as a tool for deeper, shared reflection. Pretty cool, right?
Now, you got to remember, throughout this entire 9-year story, actually building the technology was a slow grind. It was step-by-step, methodical, and often held back by a serious lack of resources.
But then, at the end of 2025, everything changed. A massive technological shift happened. AI-assisted programming finally grew up, and suddenly, those financial roadblocks to development speed, they just vanished. All of a sudden, they could build at the speed of thought.
And that brings us right up to today. All of that learning, from the desert, the forest, the river, that whole mountain climb, it is all being poured into a core feature of the platform. It's a framework designed to give communities a distinct identity, almost like a soul, right inside the system.
Which leads us to the big date, the launch of the very first version of the platform. The culmination of this whole 9-year journey is set for the first quarter of 2026.
So this isn't one of those stories where the real work begins now. No way! This is the culmination of so much hard work. It's the result of a long, profound, and let's be honest, often really difficult journey. After 9 years of walking, climbing, and learning, they're finally ready.
And so this whole incredible journey of Changemappers leaves us with a question. And it's not just for them. It's really for all of us. How might you, better connect to yourself, to nature, and to other people to actually be the change that we all want to see in the world?